During a visit to Moscow by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in 2010, Vladimir Putin remarked that Israel was Russia's long-term partner in the Middle East. We say again and again that there are over 1 million Russian citizens living in your country. Israel is almost a Russian-speaking country. During the Soviet era, and especially under Brezhnev, such statements would have been unthinkable. You probably cannot imagine Putin uttering such words in 2024 either. Russia and Israel have a special relationship which has evolved several times. The connection between Russia and Israel dates back to the late 19th century, since many of the early Zionist settlers in Palestine were Jews from the Russian Empire. What exactly does this relationship consist of? What has influenced the constantly evolving state of relations between Israel and Russia? In this video, we're going to examine Russia's ties to Israel and the broader implications of those ties. The focus of this video is Russo-Israeli relations post-1991. Thus, I will not spend much time on the Cold War here. You can watch one of my other videos on Russian Jewry here to learn more. The Soviet Union was the first country to recognize the new state of Israel de jure in 1948. Stalin also allowed arms sales to the new state of Israel via Czechoslovakia, then occupied by the Soviets. The left-wing labor Zionist tendency dominated Israeli politics at the time, and Stalin believed he could win the Israelis to his camp. Indeed, labor Zionism was a school of thought that originated among Jews in the Russian Empire. Mapam, the forebear of Israel's modern-day Meretz party, was a Marxist political party which called for a Jewish-Arab binational state and was once the second largest in the Knesset. Andrei Gromyko, then Soviet ambassador to the UN, stated, "Both Arabs and Jews have historical roots in Palestine, and it would be unjust to deny the rights of the Jewish people to realize their aspirations to establish their own state." However, Israel's orientation became more pro-Western. Israel supported the US-led invasion of Korea in June 1950, and ties between the USSR and the Arab states deepened in the ensuing years. Egypt, Syria, and Iraq in particular were close to the Soviet Union. Following the Israeli victory in the Six-Day War of June 1967, relations between Moscow and Tel Aviv deteriorated even further. You can learn more about the Six-Day War by watching my video on the subject here. During this war, Israel's Arab adversaries were armed with Soviet equipment and trained by Soviet military advisors. During the Brezhnev years, anti-Zionist propaganda, which was little more than thinly veiled anti-Semitic propaganda, became commonplace. Jews in the Soviet Union were yet again targeted by the Soviet government. Soviet Jews were barred from many government positions, accused of disloyalty to the Soviet Union, and subjected to draconian restrictions on migrating to Israel. Soviet Jewish dissident Natan Sharansky spent almost a decade in prison for his activities. Sharansky would go on to serve as Deputy Prime Minister of Israel and in other ministerial offices. Under the comparatively liberal leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev, Soviet restrictions on making Aliyah were eased. In 1989, more than 12,000 Soviet Jews moved to Israel, though it must be mentioned that this was out of a total of 71,000 emigres. As the United States began to enact restrictions on Soviet Jewish migration, more Jews made Aliyah. From 1991 onward, more than 1 million Jews from the former Soviet Union migrated to Israel. This diaspora maintained significant cultural and business ties to Russia. Several leading Israeli business conglomerates had strong ties to Russia prior to October 2023. At the end of the Cold War, Russia and Israel enjoyed full relations. Israel also began to upgrade its ties with the former Soviet republics in Asia, such as Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan. The Israelis established full relations with Kazakhstan in 1992, helped largely by the former's quality water-related technology. Azerbaijan is a recipient of Israeli military aid and cooperates with Israel despite being a majority Muslim state. After the October 7th attacks, sympathetic Azerbaijanis decorated the gate of the Israeli embassy in Baku with teddy bears and flowers. Israel receives approximately 40% of its oil from Azerbaijan and 20% from Kazakhstan. Israel is Azerbaijan's leading oil importer too. As far as Russia proper is concerned, relations between Jerusalem and Moscow have been marred by the latter's continued closeness with Israel's enemies, Syria and Iran. It was precisely because of the poor state of the Russian economy in the 1990s that Moscow exported its energy-related expertise to countries in the Middle East. Syria and Iran continue to purchase advanced Russian weaponry capable of threatening Israel. Also, Syria hosts Russia's only military base in the Mediterranean, essential for Russian force projection capabilities. On the other side of the equation, Israel's connections with former Soviet states like Georgia have served to complicate Russian-Israeli relations even more. Despite this, Russia and Israel have maintained dialogue on the issue of airstrikes in Syria. Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak visited Russia in August 1999. Former Russian President Boris Yeltsin visited Israel with a delegation in 2000. When the Second Chechen War broke out in 1999, a number of Israeli political figures, including Natan Sharansky interestingly enough, expressed support for Russia's operation against the Chechen separatists. Following the Cold War, the Russian Federation became more sympathetic to Israeli positions. Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, who visited Russia in 2001 and 2003, desired for Israel to broaden its diplomatic relationships and reduce its dependence on the US. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made regular visits to Russia. Bibi was actually one of the first foreign leaders to congratulate Putin on his electoral victory in 2012. Putin's subsequent June 2012 visit to Israel was the third by a Russian president. Economics has been at the forefront of Israeli-Russian relations. Israeli businessmen, a good portion of whom were born in the former USSR, were engaged in investment projects in Russia. In 2010, an Israel-Russia Business Council was created. As of 2020, trade between Russia and Israel exceeded $2 billion. Israel's quest for energy security has also facilitated deeper ties with the Russian Federation. Russia has tried to increase its presence in Israel's natural gas sector. In 2010, Russia and Israel signed a military cooperation agreement too. For years, Bibi and Putin maintained the appearance of a friendship. Bibi Netanyahu was the guest of honor at the 2018 Victory Day parade in Moscow. At the end of the ceremony, a Russian military orchestra performed the Israeli national anthem, Hatikva, on Red Square. During a 2019 election campaign, Netanyahu used a picture of himself shaking hands with Vladimir Putin in an attempt to appeal to Russian-Israeli voters. In December 2022, Putin welcomed Bibi's return as Israeli Prime Minister, but this bromance would not endure, however. In response to Hamas's attack on October 7, 2023, Vladimir Putin described the attacks as a quote-unquote clear example of the failure of US policy in the Middle East. Putin also compared the blockade of Gaza to the siege of Leningrad during World War II. Moscow hosted a Hamas delegation in October 2023 as well. This meeting was also attended by Iran's foreign minister. Due to its international isolation after February 2022, the Russian Federation leaned more on its strategic partners, most notably Iran. If you would like to watch my video on Russia and Iran's relationship to learn more, you can do so here. Consequently, Russia and Israel's diplomatic relations soured after October 7th. The Russian Orthodox Church exerts influence in Israel through its holdings in Jerusalem. During the Cold War, the Russian Orthodox Church mission in Jerusalem was used as a base for KGB operatives in Israel. The Russian Orthodox Church, officially the Moscow Patriarchate, has been marching in lockstep with Moscow's foreign policy for quite some time. NGOs associated with the Moscow Patriarchate operate in Israel as well. These NGOs are often headed by Russians with intelligence backgrounds. Why does this matter to the average American or Westerner? Why the hell would you care about Russia and Israel not getting along? It is precisely because of Russia's diplomatic isolation that it has formed closer ties with Israel's enemies, Syria and Iran, thus contributing to the ongoing instability in the region. Around a third of the world's petroleum still comes from the Middle East. A significant portion of the world's natural gas also comes from the Middle East. Russia still supplies much of Europe's energy needs as well. If you're European, chances are your lifestyle is supported by Russian energy and Israeli technological and scientific expertise. Motorola Israel's R&D department introduced the first cell phone. The 8088 processor, which powered the world's first PC, was developed in Intel Israel's Haifa office. Due to the sheer volume of cutting-edge tech companies in the country, Israel has been dubbed the Silicon Valley of the Middle East. Even more importantly, Jews from the former USSR are heavily represented in Israel's tech sector. Both Israel and Russia's importance to the global economy cannot be understated. The relationship between Moscow and Jerusalem is worthy of our attention since our modern lifestyles depend on at least one of these two countries in some way. The geopolitical fault lines formed during the Cold War still exist in the present-day Middle East. Russo-Israeli relations carry with them broader regional and global implications. What do you guys think? How will Russia's relationship with Israel evolve once the war in Gaza ends? How will Israel's relations with Russia impact Jerusalem's relations with Ukraine? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.